So we're going to continue trying to learn a little bit of Brachos. A general comment, which I am assuming many feel similarly, which is really the sugya, the feeling when you learn any topic, is that once you focus on something, all of a sudden you start to actually, do the things that you focus on. Bracha Achrona we mentioned might be a little bit of a lost art, but then you talk about it, and then you focus on it a little bit, and all of a sudden hey, Bracha Achrona, maybe I should, maybe I should do that. So let's today try to delve a little bit deeper into Ikkur and Tafel. We mentioned the previous time, the Gemara in Brachos, Daf Mem Dalid, that has a rule, Zah Klal Kol Shehimoy Ikkur V'imoy Tefila Mevarech Al Ikkur Upaiter Es HaTefila. We mentioned last week the Ray Force's book opens up with the Hakdama that it patters, is that there's no bracha required, not that there's no bracha required on it, because everything needs a bracha. You're not allowed to be nana me'elam hazeh b'loi bracha. But rather it's ki'ilu, you made the bracha on it. And that's the reason why, and we're going to get more to these examples in a moment, but that's the reason why you have a bowl of cereal and milk, you make a mezainis or hadama, whatever type of cereal you're eating, which parenthetically I think by now everyone knows, that depending on the company could change the bracha. You're eating the Haimisha brands, you're eating the non-Haimisha brands. Different companies are, cornflakes was always the quintessential example. Whether you're eating the Kellogg's ones, in Israel they call it the Israeli brand, here we'll call it the Yeshivish brand, the Jewish brand. It's going to determine the bracha. The Kellogg's one is Adam, the other one is Shahakal. It has to do with the process that they're made. Are they steamrolled or are the corn, crushed up to a million pieces and then created into the cornflakes? That will just stop in the world of brachas. Before we go a little bit deeper into brachas, what is the story with the bracha achrona? What about bracha achrona? Meaning, you had your cereal and milk. So we just said you had your Fruitios. So no problem, those are all shahakals. You had your I'm thinking about foods that maybe So you had your kuryot, of course, just with Shabbos Avada. So you made a mezainis on your kuryot, or you had your Rice Krispies. And you made, Rice Krispies is not a good example. You have your kuryot, let's just stick with that, okay? Good, a good mezainis cereal, beautiful. You had it, and you had a lot of milk with it. Why did you have a lot of milk with it? Because that's how you eat your cereal. You finished. Do you now have to make a bayrei nefashais on the milk? The reason you make a bracha rishayna is because it was pater. What about the bracha achrayna? It says the Mechaber, says the Shulchan Aruch in Reish Yud Beis Sif Aleph. We'll just read it together. Says the Mechaber, the Beis Yosef says it is Pashit. Just to read the Mechaber, sorry, this should have been open. Reish Yud Beis, Ikkur vtafel, Kol shu Ikkur v'imay tefila, Mevarech al Ikkur porta as a tefila. Like we just said, Bein bracha shel lefneha, Bein bracha shel achra. It's both. Loi mi bai, and now he gets involved in Loi mi bai, Ikkur me'urav v'tafel, whether it's mixed together. Elafilu, okay, so that's what we have to get involved in right now. So you don't make a bracha achrona on your milk. Now, what happens? Now, again, we're not going to get involved in these cases because these are interesting cases. What if you had less than a shear, just something to think about, less than a shear of the ikkur and more than the shear of the tafel? You had like a whole sea of milk and you had 3 kuryot. Now, why your bracha rishayna, whatever happened, do you now have to make a brain nefashis? It gets a little bit complicated. There's Ramesh that says that it's a... Right, exactly. Well, what do you do in such a scenario? Let's just, again, whether you were supposed to do what you did or not, maybe it's because you messed up, maybe it's because you thought you were eating cereal, whatever it is, stop. These are interesting cases, and it's going to have to do with the lumtus if it's a pater or not. Let's leave it. Let's go into now what is an ikkur and a tafel, and let's try to eventually figure out what's going on with sushi, and what's going on with the steak salad, and what's going on with other salads, etc. So the first level of an ikkur and tafel is, as we mentioned last time, is a real tafel in the fact that it's just coming as an auxiliary. I don't use auxiliary. Just coming to fix the item you're eating, the ketchup on the noodles. What's the ketchup doing? The milk in this cereal. It's purely a secondary item. It's a taroives, number one. It's a mix together. And the second item, as the Mishnah Berurah over here writes, Sivkot and Aleph, so clearly it's not two different items. So you make a mezainis and your noodles, and it obviously patters up the ketchup. You make a mezainis on the cereal, and it patters up the milk. Good, that is level number one. I think that's very obvious, and that's going to be across the board, whatever bracha it is. Meaning, let's say you're having cornflakes like we just spoke about. The hadama on the cornflakes, if it's Kellogg's, or you're having frosted flakes, the hadama on the frosted flakes, so the cornflakes will patter up the milk, even though it's a hadama. Hadama doesn't have the chashivas of mezainis, etc. It still patters it up. That's level number one. They're mixed together, and it's coming lahachshiroi. It's coming litaknoi. Now, level number two. Level number two is, as we already mentioned, is the chamishas aminim. Hey mine dagan, that we paskin, if they're me'urav one with the other, what is the halacha? Mizaynais always wins. B'mnei shemine dagan nechshavin le'ikkur tamid, says the Mishnah Berurah. And this is the reason why, in as much as maybe we'll get to the fact that chalent is going to be a big shayla, but in the very beginning of a chalent, you start with some barley, so you're starting with a real mizaynais. I don't care how much meat, I don't care how many potatoes you have, the pashtus l'chayra would be the mizaynais is going to win. Now, I say l'chayra because it's not so simple. Let's leave it. But it is simple that once I have a mizaynais versus something in a mixture, then of course the mizaynais is going to win. Unless, what's the one caveat? And this caveat is going to be a big problem in many, many scenarios. If the mezainis is coming lidavik, very good, as a binder. As a binder, yes.
You don't want to discuss the shalom, but what would...
We're going to get there in a moment. We're going to get there 1 minute. 1 minute. Mamish, hopefully 1 minute. Where are we holding? Mamish, hopefully 1 minute. If it's coming lidavik, this is the reason why. Licorice, the wheat inside the licorice is there as a binding ingredient. I think it's almost conclusive nowadays. I think almost everyone agrees that the licorice is going to be a shahak. You have a lot of wheat inside. It's only ledavik, the Pri Megadim over here in the Psicha spells this out clearly, and therefore it will not become the Ikkur. So now this is where things get confusing. And this is the reason why the challenge is not so simple. And the reason is because what happens when something is chashiv? A davar chashiv. Now, so again, number one is, we said, very easy, the ketchup. Good. Number two should be very easy, is mizainis. And the truth is, it is important because when things are going to get confusing, the pashtos, we always have to remember that mizainis is going to have a very high place in our world. Okay. Now, number 3 and 4 is where things start clashing, which is chashiv and roiv. Chashiv and roiv, and really, this really blows up in a piece of sushi so beautifully, really, really beautifully for the real sushi eaters. For the non-real sushi eaters amongst us, it doesn't blow up a chlal, which we'll see in a moment. Meaning, if you're a real sushi eater, you eat that sashimi, you'll take that big fat chunk of fish, you'll swirl it, with all the wonderful juices flying off it. Now, you obviously know that this is not my thing. Then, for you, the fish is a chashiv entity. And the rice is a fake mezainis. Important to realize. It's not a real mezainis. But, so what do we do now? What we do now is, we have a davar chashiv, fish, versus something else. Does the davar chashiv wins? Does the davar chashiv win? And the simple answer is yes. The chashivos should beat out the roiv, says the Mishnah Berurah. Mihu. And again, I give the example I just gave particularly, because if you're going to be one of the people that, no, you don't love the fish, you eat it as a combination of everything, then that's going to be a new mitzias. We have to down it up, which the place can do. But if you're a scenario, calls it dafka b'shneim davar chashiv, and I have two entities which are both chashiv, that's when we go with the rules. But one of them is not chashiv, av shehu aroiv, batal hu legabe amiyat hachashiv dehu ikkur. So seemingly, if you love the fish should win, and you should only make a shahakal. Even though it's rice. A good example, Rav Elyashiv in Mezei Sabracha, page 91, discusses I think what someone here might have gotten for lunch, which is, there you go, rice and meat. Rice and meat. Rice is maybe the roif. The meat is a davar chashiv. Says Rav Elyashiv, Chatach basar lechatichos ketanois. Your meat is cut up into small pieces. V'arvavim be'oirez. And they're mixed with rice. Oy tapuach adam. Or maybe they're mixed with potatoes. V'oirez hu aroiv. And the rice is the roiv. Mevayrech boire mine mezaynes ala oirez. Upater bazeh es ha-basar. So Rav Elyashiv argues on the Mishnah Berurah seemingly. Why? Why? He's calling it Aruch Hashulchan. He's not arguing the Mishnah Berurah. Why? Because we do not say the basar is the ikkur, machmas chashivusai, but rather the only would work if both of them are not some level chashiv. And this is where things get very, very gray. Because rice is also chashiv. Rice is also chashiv. Now, nafkamina maybe would be what? A salad. Salad l'chayro would be the nafkamina. That you're not going to say that the lettuce is also chashiv. Lettuce is adam, it's certainly not chashiv. So that would be a case that the pashtus is there, the meat would win out. Would win out.
Means to you or to...
I'll be pashtus in the world of brachos, everything is subjective. I'll be pashtus. So Rav Elyashiv disagrees, and Rav Elyashiv says we're only going to go with the davar chashiv is only if it's not opposed by a rice of some sorts. So we have a little bit of a gray area already. And now when it comes to roiv, that's where things get a little bit more heated. And before we get to the more heated case, let's just say over there, let's leave this on the side. I'm going to forget this, but it's okay. It's fine if we forget this. Let's go into the big problem. Okay? I don't know how much more we're going to get. So far, we need to come. So we have to build. It gets right now is where it's going to get very confusing. If you're confused now, it's okay. But right now, it's going to get even more confusing. What we came out with when it comes to mizaynais with a davar chashiv, it would seem that the Mishnah Berurah paskin for us, you make a bracha on the davar chashiv, and it seems that Rav Elyashiv says not the way. But the reason, slow. So we're getting to right now. Right now is where we're getting to that. Right now. Now is where the things get confusing. It's something called, and maybe this is what Rav Elyashiv was talking about. Maybe that was more the klal, and now we're going to zoom more in and see what's going on over here. Is that we have something called me'urav v'nikr. We have a mixture that we could see both items. What do I do now? And this is the famous machlekes in all of Brachos, all of Ikkur vtafel. It's a machlekes Chai Adam versus the Mishnah Berurah. And this is where things get very complicated. The Chai Adam says, make two brachos. You have two items, they're both nikr, they're mixed together, you make two brachos. Each one has its own chashivas, even though it's a davar mi'ot, but it's nikr. Now, what does it mean nikr? In our world, many things, most things are going to be nikr, right? I don't think it's going to be teeny little, maybe if the meat's mamish, pulverized, it's not nikr, but usually it's going to be nikr. Usually, I hope that in your salad, in your steak salad, the steak is going to be nikr. If it's not nikr, you should return it. So, in all of those cases, says the Chai Adam, you make two brachos. In Kal Nun Aleph Sif Yud Gimel, he says, "Im kol echa nikr la'atzmoi ve'enoi na'aseh litafel mevarich alav kol echad bar chasai harauya loy." The big problem is that comes on the Mishnah Berurah, and the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Chai Adam, and then the Mishnah Berurah continues, says Lamaisa near the Safek brachos lahakel v'lo yevarich ela kibirchas haroif. You only make the bracha on the roif. And this is where we run into a very serious problem. Because now what do we do with all our cases? What do we do with all our cases where it's nikr and it's roif and we have a big problem? Now there is a third shita which doesn't apply in the cases we spoke about. It applies more on like a cheesecake type of case, is when it's cooked together. Something's cooked together, that's a graz that says it goes only when it's cooked together. And that's that. So now, in order to make some level of lamaisa out of this, it goes basar the klalim, will go basar either the roiv if there's not, or or the davar chashiv. And that's the reason why we all know Shavuos time, you always have the cheesecake, that you have the mezainis on the bottom and you have the shackle on the top. And that'll be totally that if it's cooked together, then you're going to make the mezainis. If it's not cooked together, then maybe it's called two separate entities. And the cheese is something chashiv, and there's a lot of cheese. Then you would run into this issue that we're talking about now, that it's nicker and it's a tarayvas, and then maybe you would make two separate brachas. So the question is, what do you do? What do you do? Meaning, can you... Mishnah Berurah knew the Chayadim, and he said not to do that because of Safik Brachos L'Hakel. So what do? You're running into a serious problem. You say, okay, just make two brachos. No, the Mishnah Berurah told you not to do that.
Make a bracha on something else.
Oh, so okay, fine. As always, you can always make a bracha on something else. Fine. You can always wash, right? I'll never forget. I think we've all had this. Back when we were younger in elementary school, it's like, what's the bracha on chalent? Eat with hamaisi. Shgayach. So what do I do now? Okay. So now, the Aruch Hashulchan has an eitzah. Aruch Hashulchan has an eitzah. Says the Aruch Hashulchan, what you should do is, you should pick a little bit out and make it not a tarayvas. If you take it out of the tarayvas, says the Aruch Hashulchan, then it's going to work. Rishid Beisif Beis, a very famous Aruch Hashulchan. He says as follows. The betfila hamureves loishayich Ikkur vtafel el kshaoichlem biyachad kemoish mevashlim their grouping. That's like im kitnius into chandama shaloikim bekaf achazen zed. That's also giving us a limit, by the way, what's called the tarayves. Aruch Hashulchan is saying is that on each spoonful you have the two of them, and this is the Aruch Hashulchan that everyone quotes, that if on each spoonful you don't have the two of them, and each spoonful you have really one of them, then that is the overwhelming majority. Says the Aruch Hashulchan, "Vazafilu me'enoi nilkach bekach rak min echad, gam kein avitafel. Aval abasar eichlem fnei atzmai oikodim atash l'achach ein ze ikar. Tavuhu adim liket atapuach adam mitoich atavshel. V'oichlem b'fnei atzmai mivarech aleim boirei bri hadama." So says the Aruch Hashulchan, what you're allowed to do is, you're allowed to pick out an item. Now the only problem is, how is that different than what the Chayadim said? Chayadim said to make multiple brachas. Mishnah Berurah responded, don't make multiple brachas.
So you take one scoop with both of them on and make a bracha on the zones, that might be a problem.
And Masha Inkin.
If you're only taking the zaydas and you make a bracha on that, what are you going to tell me? Like it should have popped the other thing. You're not eating the other thing now.
Okay, one could have heard what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but Lamaisa, what's very interesting is this isn't discussed. I mean, we're up to the Aruch Hashulchan and we have confusion. So the next level is the Gedolei HaPoskim, and they asked them this question, that when it comes to one pottering the other, can you take one out? And they said you shouldn't do that. So rather, what do they say you should do? What would be a way that l'chayra everyone would be maskim? Is you take out the item. This is the Sefer Makara Bracha, Zaysa Bracha, and all the Bracha Sefer Svarim want to the eitzah to help everyone. Because, with all the klolim, which I know we didn't answer up all the klolim yet, I wanted really to get to this point, and then we can work backwards. Because this is going to work in all cases, basically. The eitzah is, what you do is, you remove lahaser mitecha terayves. Don't eat it right away. Lehaniach al makom acher lizman katzer. Nisbatel habitel. I think he meant to write a terayves. But either way, it doesn't make a difference. The point is, if I have a salad and I just don't know what to do, I'm just confused. There's 4 million items in there. So if I take an item out and then I make a bracha, that is the shayla, which just in case anyone's confused and just wants to give up the whole brachas thing, I don't want to be that nice. But if you make a bracha, the Chayadim says you're allowed to do that. The whole world is follow the Chayadim. I know the Mishnah Berurah is not happy with you when he says something brachas l'hakel. But l'maisa, it's not like the biggest avla to make the bracha. And I know that wasn't an answer what to do, because we want to know what the lechatchila is, but it's a little bit that we sort of have to understand that if you go ahead and you make the bracha, the Chai Adam says that's what you should do in a case of a tarevis, that it's nicker, and obviously if you're picking it out, it's nicker. That's just, something in the back of our brains. But says these brachas farm, what you do is you take out the piece of steak and you put it down to the side, and you take out the piece of lettuce and you put it down to the side, and you deconstruct your tarevis. Now it's separate entities. Now they're not mixed. Now they have nothing to do with each other. So now what do? Now you do anytime if you have a plate of lettuce and meat and rice, what do? You go the regular Kedima and Brachos. Mezainis comes first. Then comes maybe Eitz Adama, Tali, and maybe the one that you like better. But at that point, you got out of the whole Shaila of the Chai Adam and the Mishnah Brura. So in summation, that's where we got to. That's going to be the Eitzah that l'chayra everyone would agree worked. Whether your Eitzah works also could very well be that they would agree, especially maybe the spoon, the fork, maybe that's called a makom bifnei atzmai. Maybe. What were they doing? Okay, yesh ladin. But maybe that would be an Eitzah as well. Now, when it comes to all the other confusing cases, we have to get back to. Just to end off with one more case, which is pretty conclusive, is if the item is there for decoration. Now, whether decoration means crunch, we're going to have to get to, because maybe every mezainis is crunch. But if I'm having ice cream and I'm taking some cut up fruit and I'm putting it on top, I'm putting blueberries on top of my ice cream, what am I eating? I'm eating ice cream, I'm not eating blueberries. So therefore, I would make a sha'akal and would pater up the blueberries. Now, what if I put granola on top? Would it be the same thing? One would assume, you're eating ice cream and you're just adding a little decoration of granola. Now, at what point, it's not decoration, what is it?
Yogurt parfait.
Okay, yogurt parfait becomes a bit, because the real reason is it's a separate yogurt entity. It's not a little bit of yogurt sprinkled, it's not a little bit of granola sprinkled. For example, they have, in the world, schnitzel is where all these things converge, right? Because if you think about it, in the world of shitzel, if you say mezainis wins, and in the world, everyone should say you make a mezainis. And we all know whether that should be or should not be. We all know half the world, most of the world, the whole world doesn't do that. We all know that there is definitely someone, maybe Ramosha Feinstein, that says you make a shahakal. And the question is, what's going on over here? Because it's a mezainis, and if a mezainis is decoration, that's why I said maybe decoration and crunch, maybe that's two different things. Maybe the mezainis on the schnitzel is a crunch, which is a separate thing, which we have to get to. But something which is clearly for decoration, you put a little bit of fruit on top, which on yogurt would be a case also. You sprinkle a little bit of fruit on top, it would be patered up by your yogurt. Now the point that you're going to have on every spoonful the fruit, that's going to be the point that you're going to run into an issue. Because no longer do you have yogurt with the tafel of that. That's where the point that you're coming to have two roivs, two ikkurs. That's the point that you need to make a second bracha. And how is it going to pater up? And that's going to get involved in this mess. And we'll pick it up from here.